Hey, welcome to Seaside Chats with Kenneth Arthur, the Instant Reaction Podcast, Take Two. Yes, this is Take Two of the Instant Reaction Podcast. Last night being Sunday, I recorded the Instant Reaction Podcast. It went for about 30 minutes. I tried to do something different for the first time, which was upload directly to SoundCloud. So that means recording from SoundCloud and not using YouTube. And it turns out that that is a horrible mistake to do. Do not do that with SoundCloud, because I guess if it errors out in the middle, it just deletes the entire thing that you recorded there with SoundCloud. I'm still uploading this to SoundCloud, but let's just put an extra fuck you to SoundCloud for not, knowing what the fuck they're doing, and at having it just sort of erase the whole thing because for whatever reason it aired out while uploading the recording I just did. Anyhow, we're back on YouTube Live. And this is Kenneth Arthur coming to you to talk about the Seahawks 37-18 win over the San Francisco 49ers on Sunday. The Seattle improves to 2-1, and we'll talk a little bit about what that means, what the win means, Russell Wilson's knee, and Doug Baldwin, Jimmy Graham, the defense, everything in between, as Seattle prepares to take on the New York Jets next Sunday in New Jersey, 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. And, the Jets coming off of a loss, Ryan Fitzpatrick throwing 6 interceptions in that game. First time that's happened since Peyton Manning did it, 2007, I want to say. So let's talk about Seattle's win. They go into this game at about 80% favorites to win by ProFootballReference.com's win probability. And it never gets any worse than that by basically the second quarter, when the Seattle Seahawks were up 20-0 on San Francisco. They were 98.6% to win, 98.6%, 98 degrees. Nick Lachey moving on. Even as San Francisco scores some ugly points later in the game, they make it 37-18. Seattle was 100% favored to win. Not even miracles existed for San Francisco during Seattle's win. Just a really easy victory for them, although it's not flawless, of course, as they give up 18 points. They give up 2 touchdowns to Carlos Hyde in the fourth quarter. They give up a fourth down conversion. San Francisco, if they hadn't been down by so many, maybe they would have given up a field goal, and San Francisco wouldn't have been going for it. The entire game plan changes, but, as a defense, you have to force a 3-and-out. They hadn't given up a touchdown. They'd only given up 1 touchdown on the season going into that fourth quarter against the San Francisco 49ers. And the defense lets up. After the game, Richard Sherman refusing to talk to reporters, but just not really into it. Obviously, there was upset players on the defense, a lot of fans calling out Earl Thomas's perhaps poor play in this game, especially after the poor play that we saw on some things that would happen in Week 1 against the Miami Dolphins. That being said, as much as we're not sure what to expect from Earl Thomas, I'm pretty sure what to expect from Earl Thomas. The guy's like a 27-year-old all-pro who has pretty much had a flawless career and is probably not just going to fall apart at the seams. At this point, that would be quite surprising and unprecedented for a player of his age and caliber. But, I think we just take it week to week and expect the best. But even that being said, Seattle Seahawks, with one more game left to go in the week, that being the Monday Night Football game, the Seahawks are second in points allowed, first in yards allowed, first in first downs allowed, second in passing yards allowed, first in touchdown passes allowed, which is 0. They have not given up a passing touchdown through 3 games yet, even though they have faced, Ryan Tannehill, Case Keenum, and Blaine Gabbert. The point stands that they have given up 0 passing touchdowns. And next week against Ryan Fitzpatrick, who had 0 touchdowns and 6 interceptions this week, hopefully they keep him out of the end zone as well. And they can go into that after the bye. They can go into their Week 6 game again. Matt Ryan and the Atlanta Falcons at home, trying to keep that passing touchdown streak alive. Matt Ryan having a resurgence of sorts this season. Then he's playing on Monday night against the New Orleans Saints. He's got 5 touchdowns in the first 2 games, a passer rating of 121.4. Everything working well for Atlanta, and that's going to be a test for the Seattle Seahawks defense, unlike one that they've had so far or will have after facing the Jets, I'm sure. But the rushing defense is doing pretty good too. 9th in rushing yards allowed, 9th in yards per carry allowed. But they wanted to shut that down because They had given up 64 total rushing yards in each of their first 2 games. They give up 135 rushing yards to the 49ers, most of that coming in the fourth quarter. Carlos Hyde becomes the first 100-yard back against the Seattle Seahawks since Jamal Charles in 2014. But they do get the win, and the offense scores 37 points, and they get the first turnover with Bobby Wagner collecting an interception. They could have had a couple more interceptions. They need to lock that in. But, of course, the biggest story coming out of the game being Russell Wilson's health. He is tackled by Eli Harold, who gets called for a horse collar tackle and lands awkwardly on Russell Wilson's left leg, the knee. It is confirmed through an MRI on Monday morning. Pete Carroll said on 710 ESPN that Russell Wilson has a sprained MCL in the left knee, but that he, quote, feels great. And leave it up to Wilson to feel great about a sprain in his left knee and a high ankle sprain in his right ankle. He's just feeling fine. And I think, we can admit that most likely what's happening is that the team has to cover up the fact that Russell Wilson is made up of electronics and, metal bars and springs and gears and cords and USB drives. And so, what they all have to do is say, well, this is a this and this is a this. But this is the reason that Russell Wilson has not missed any practices in his career or not missed any games, is that if you took a scalpel and began to cut his skin, as it were, to open him up, you would see something similar to what you have seen from Arnold Schwarzenegger in the film Terminator 2: Judgment Day, when they cut open his arm and showed you the gears and the wires beneath. That's what you're going to get if you actually opened up Russell Wilson. But that's not something that they're going to show you. As Pete Carroll would say, jet fuel cannot melt Russell Wilson's steel beams. So that's why Russell Wilson is going to play next week against the Jets. That's why he's going to be fine, and that's why I'm not worried. The numbers after 3 games, not atypical of Russell Wilson to get off to slow starts. He's completing 63% of his passes, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception, 7.5 yards per attempt, and a passer rating of 88.5. Those are this is all coming off of injuries. In last night on Sunday, he did have a pass rating of 114.9, his highest of the season, 10.57 yards per attempt, his highest of the season. But last year he led the NFL in pass rating at 110.1. His 8.3 yards per attempt last season was among the best in the NFL. And since entering the league in 2012, he leads the NFL in yards per attempt. So, you want to keep that up for a guy who has a career yards per attempt of 8.0, a career pass rating of 101.1. So we just want to keep those numbers up. He was taken out of the game. I think he could have, if he was healthy enough to play, or if they had, if they didn't need to keep the conspiracy to cover up the fact that he's not human, if they could have put him back into the game. We saw Trevone Boykin come in and throw a touchdown. That one would have gone to Russell Wilson. I don't think he would have, thrown that interception. And maybe we get two touchdowns, 0 interception day from Wilson. But as it were, that's the day that he has. And I think he's going to come back and be just fine. Excuse me. Going up against the Jets next week. The Jets are 21st in passing yards allowed, but 30th in net yards per passing attempt allowed. The Jets have a great rushing defense so far, 3rd in yards per carry, 3rd in rushing yards, 3rd in touchdowns. They have the most rushing yards they've allowed in a game so far is 86 to the Buffalo Bills, and the Bills just put up 200-plus rushing yards on the Arizona Cardinals. So it could be a rough day for Kristen Michael. It could be a rough day for Thomas Rawls if he's healthy, or CJ Prosise if he's healthy, though I think that's, one of the things that is to the benefit of Seattle's running game this season, is that they do have more depth thanks to the fact that Kristen Michael came back and is looking better than ever. So now they've got Michael and Rawls, and then they've got the backups with Alex Collins and CJ Prosise. So there's something there. But as far as the passing defense goes for the New York Jets, with Darrelle Revis looking, just a shell of his former self this season. If Darrelle Revis has fallen apart, then what else do they have? But that's, a passing defense that's giving up a passer rating of 110.7 this season is the New York Jets. 71.3% completion percentage against the Jets, as they've faced Andy Dalton, Tyrod Taylor, and Alex Smith. Not a murderer's row. A very efficient 3 quarterbacks, and they're going to get another one with Russell Wilson in week 4. They're going to get Ben Roethlisberger in week 5. They're going to get Carson Palmer in week 6. They're going to get Joe Flacco in week 7. And then they're going to get the Cleveland Browns' 6th or 7th quarterback this year in week 8. So right now, the Jets could be in trouble. That's just with the quarterbacks that they have to face and the fact that their quarterback has a passer rating of 59.3 this season. Ryan Fitzpatrick has 3 touchdowns and 7 interceptions, 6 of those, of course, coming in one game. But the Jets not looking so good as a team that was on the cusp of the playoffs a year ago. But they do have a benefit to them, which is that can the Seattle Seahawks offensive line stop a defensive line of Leonard Williams, Muhammad Wilkerson, and Sheldon Richardson? That's about as good as it gets in the league. And we saw what happened against the Dolphins defensive line. We saw what happened against the Rams defensive line. That's going to be a problem, I think, for the Seattle Seahawks, especially if Russell Wilson isn't moving around at 100%. The offense might have a tough time going to the East Coast, playing in the morning, and facing off their offensive line against that defensive line. So maybe that could be the issue for Seattle. But you would hope that defensively they're able to, turn it around into their favor. Though I will say 6 interceptions by Ryan Fitzpatrick. I think Ryan can rest at ease that he will not be throwing 6 interceptions. He will not have any turnovers maybe against the Seattle Seahawks, who have forced just 1 turnover through 3 games. So if Fitzpatrick throws a ball into the area of a Seattle defender, it'll probably be bobbled. If there's a tipped pass in the air, there won't be anyone close enough to reach it. If there's a fumble, then I'm sure that it'll scoop and skeet and scot this way and that, and the Seattle Seahawks won't be able to land on it and secure it. It'll go back to the Jets, or it'll go out of bounds, or the player will recover it and they'll fall out of bounds. So, take some solace in the fact that you probably won't turn the ball over 6 or 7 times next week, Ryan Fitzpatrick. But as a Seattle Seahawks fan, I hope you find it in your heart to turn it over twice. Seattle has lost the turnover battle in all 3 of their games this season. They've turned it over 5 times. They've only forced 1. And still they are 2-1. The turnover battle has not played a factor in their results at all since dating back to the beginning of last season, really, and maybe even before that. But the Seahawks are 28th in points scored, 11th. They've been able to, in 27th in yards per carry. So that's, a thing. But with Thomas Rose, but you still would have to look at the fact that with Christine Michael is averaging 5.2 yards per carry. So Christine Michael has been a significant threat, one of the best running backs in the NFL right now, because that's sort of the age that we live in, is that it doesn't take much to be one of the best running backs in the NFL. Michael has 232 yards. He's got 2 touchdowns, 5.2 yards per carry, 77 yards per game. He's adding a little bit in the air. And, if he were to be the full-time back all season long, he'd be on pace for, about 1,200 yards. But I think Thomas Rawls, if he gets healthy and right, it's really going to be, a 2-man show. But Thomas Rawls right now averaging 1 point and averaging 3.3 yards per carry as he's been hobbled. And, the opportunities haven't been as often there for Wilson. But I think they will come as the season goes. Big game for Jimmy Graham as he catches 6 passes for 100 yards and is, one of Russell Wilson's favorite targets. 9 targets on the game. Only Doug Baldwin had more. He had 10 targets. But really, it seems like Wilson, when he wants to feel successful, he's looking for Graham. He's looking for Baldwin. Graham with a huge catch down the middle on a deep ball, wrestled it away from the 49ers, I believe safety Eric Reed, and wrestled that away into his own arms. That's the value of Jimmy Graham. That's what they acquired him. If you did not like the fact that they acquired Jimmy Graham, or if you thought that he was not valuable last season, I think you're starting to find out why they were never going to cut him and save some money when he was such an important asset that they had gone out and got. Now, they've been wrong about those assets in the past with Percy Harvin and maybe Sidney Rice to some degree and Deion Branch, where they didn't necessarily give you the results that they had expected when they had used a lot of draft capital or money to acquire these players. But Jimmy Graham is, a special player. That being said, the fumble, he loses a fumble, and that's not good, and he was unable to recover that. And that's going to be, that's not going to be an ongoing issue, I don't think, though it is certainly something that you have to ding him for. Doug Baldwin, 8 catches for 164 yards and a touchdown. Doug Baldwin's just amazing. He's really proving to be one of the 5 to 10 best receivers in the NFL. And it doesn't matter anymore if you're a slot receiver, an X, a Y, a Z, an A, a B, C, D, or an M. You need to, if you can put up the numbers, if you're basically unstoppable, if you're putting yourself in a position to get wide open and go down the field and catch everything thrown your way, then you should be considered one of the best receivers in the NFL. And I would not have said that about Doug Baldwin 12 months ago. I would have definitely said he was, in that range of the 30 to 50th best receiver in the NFL. But right now, since, catching 14 touchdowns last year and then coming in this season, he's already got 2 touchdowns. He's on pace for, over 1,500 receiving yards. He's looking like, that same kind of value and as an Antonio Brown or, that if he's going to put up the numbers, how can you deny him? So, that's a really nice thing to see from Doug Baldwin is just the fact that being the best slot receiver in the NFL, and then also, being one of the best route runners, being one of the most reliable pass catchers. The catch that he made on the sidelines with one hand while he's diving stretched full out. I mean, there cannot be 5 guys in the NFL besides Doug Baldwin that can do that. And, that's what makes him an unbelievable, an undrafted free agent, just blowing minds, and he's such an unbelievable asset to the Seattle Seahawks. So it's good to see. And he's playing. He came in, he was hurt last week, and he had to, that had to hamper him a little bit through practice this week. And then he comes back and he's just phenomenal. So another good game from Doug Baldwin. Christine Michael, 20 carries for 106 yards and 2 touchdowns, the first 2 touchdowns of his career, and he set the tone. He got things going early. None of the receivers for San Francisco, the most yards by a receiver was 35 by Torrey Smith. But again, Carlos Hyde, 21 carries for 103 yards and 2 touchdowns. Blaine Gabbert, 14 of 25 for 119 yards, no touchdowns and 1 interception. And you look at the passing yards allowed by the Seahawks, total net passing yards in their first 3 weeks, 150 versus the Dolphins, 219 versus the Rams, and 119 versus the 49ers. This defense could be better than they were a year ago. No sacks for Frank Clark this week, but he still got the 3 total on the season. And overall, just no sacks in this game. And that's something that you would hope to see more of moving forward, because they had done such a good job in the first 2 weeks. Come back, start forcing those turnovers, start getting those sacks, start getting to the quarterback, and hopefully that's something to look forward to in the future. Let's do a little segment of that's good and okay, that's not good. So looking at the game this week, Russell Wilson, he comes out, he's firing, he's doing pretty much the classic Russell Wilson. He's not the mobile, but everything looked great up until, the fact that he got hurt. So you say Russell Wilson's performance and the fact that, people can be quiet once again, at least for a week or two, I guess, about the fact that Russell Wilson is a great quarterback, and let's stop arguing about that. That's good. Russell Wilson's knee injury, that's not good. Russell Wilson's MRI and the positivity surrounding his availability moving forward, that's good. If it's maybe not the best idea to play him against Wilkerson and Sheldon Richardson and Leonard Williams, that's not good. But Trevone Boykin, I think you still have to go for the win. You can't just, think that this is a game that you can get away with losing. I mean, yes, they could get away with losing it. Of course they could, but it's not like you're going to punt the game and just, go for it. I mean, you got to protect Russell Wilson, but if he's healthy enough to go, go for the win and go for, put some faith in that they'll get through the 4 quarters and go into the bye week and give him an extra week to get healthy. So, we'll see what happens there. Trevone Boykin, the fact that he came in and he had a few nice passes and he threw a touchdown, that's good. The fact that he threw an horrible interception just directly to San Francisco, and showing just how inconsistent and how much he, can look like an undrafted free agent rookie, that's not good, but still miles ahead of an undrafted free agent rookie. I mean, really unbelievably come so far and been so surprisingly good given his draft status and where that he just was, 6 months ago. That's good. Christine Michael, that's good. Thomas Rawls' injury, that's not good. The fact that they will be back together at some point, the fact that Rawls will come back, that's good. So there should only be more good coming from that. Alex Collins as a backup, not super good. Terrence McGee, 3 carries for 12 yards, but as backups go, perfectly fine. Jimmy Graham's excellent performance, that's good. The fumble, that's not good. But I think overall, we can say that Jimmy Graham, the Seahawks have him. As excited as you should have been when the Seahawks acquired him last year, and you're like, oh my God, I can't believe the Seahawks have Jimmy Graham. Now he's back, and he came back less than a year after significant knee injury that had sidelined Victor Cruz for 2 years, and Victor Cruz still doesn't seem to be the same Victor Cruz, and Jimmy Graham comes in his third game back from tearing his patellar tendon less than a year later. He catches 6 passes for 100 yards and a touchdown. Are you freaking kidding me? That is really good, and I don't want to hear any that's not good. He's back, and he is has the capabilities to be one of the top 3 tight ends in the NFL and one of the very best weapons overall. So that's good. Doug Baldwin, that's good. That's great. That's so great. Jermaine Kearse, 2 catches for 11 yards, really not a factor. But he didn't have to be necessarily, but just so not a factor. So that's not great. But, and Tyler Lockett, not able to play on offense. That's not great. But he was able to get out there, and he had a huge punt return to set up Seattle with great field position, something that they rarely have had this season. So that's great that Tyler Lockett's still a great punt returner and can show that value week in and week out, not handling kickoff duties this week, as that went to Paul Richardson as Tyler Lockett was dealing with an injury. But I still say that that's something that you're going to have to get used to, is Tyler Lockett not being on kickoff returns. Paul Richardson on offense was really not a factor, did not get out there a ton, did not have any catches. Tanner McAvoy had 1 target, no catches. But so overall, the wide receiver depth past Doug Baldwin didn't really do anything in this game, but didn't really have to either. The offensive line, that's so not great. One of the worst offensive lines, probably the worst offensive line in the NFL. False starts, holding, allowing sacks, not opening up holes. Just overall a terrible play from the offensive line from left to right. I can't really, say much positive things about the line this week. And they've got to get a lot better, a lot quicker, especially because, I don't think that they're gonna struggle against every team that has a good defensive line, which is a lot of teams these days. So that when you're facing those guys, especially if you get to the playoffs, you can't just expect to get to the playoffs and not face, some really good defensive linemen. If you look around the NFL right now in the NFC, you've got the Philadelphia Eagles with Fletcher Cox at 3-0. You got the Minnesota Vikings with Everson Griffin and Linval Joseph, and they've got a really good defensive line. The Green Bay Packers have a few good players. I wouldn't put them up at that elite level that we see with some of these other teams. And I don't know. The LA Rams are 2-1, so that's something to keep an eye on. And they're beating the Seahawks every time. So with Robert Quinn and Aaron Donald, obviously that's going to be a problem for them. So and the Carolina Panthers are at 1-2 now, but with that's a team that they'll play again this season. And Kawan Short obviously is still one of the best defensive tackles in the NFL. So that's something that that weakness could be a weakness that dooms them in the end. So it's something that they're going to have to figure out. And if they don't, the quarterback's going to continue to get in trouble, and maybe Thomas Rawls will continue to average 1.3 yards per carry. So the offensive line has to get a lot better right away, plus just drive-killing penalties. I mean, at the very least, stop getting drive-killing penalties. Like, holding, I guess, is something that it's basically indicative of a lower talent level is holding, because you're getting beat. And honestly, if you are going to get destroyed by a defensive end or a defensive tackle, and he just has an open line to Russell Wilson, then you have to hold. We saw Gary Gilliam not hold on a play this weekend on Sunday, and it almost got his quarterback killed. Like, you have to, at that point, you've just been beaten, and I guess you're going to get the 10-yard penalty, but a 10-yard penalty is much better than, watching Wilson crumpled up on the ground with sparks and smoke flying out of him. So let's just, think about that kind of stuff, but stop with the false starts and that kind of crap, because, that's something that, definitely can be fixed if you're going to be given this opportunity to start in the NFL, to not have the false starts. So that's something to keep an eye on. Defensively, Earl Thomas's performance, obviously I got to say that's not great, but he's Earl Thomas, so I got to say that's great overall. Bobby Wagner, another week where he just looks like perhaps the best middle linebacker or one of the best overall linebackers in the NFL. So that's got to be great. He's got 20 tackles, an interception, and 2 passes defense through 3 games. Deshaun Shedd comes back from a poor game against Kenny Britt and the Rams to have a pretty good game this week. So I got to say that's great. The defensive line not getting any sacks, that's not great. Giving up 100 yards to Carlos Hyde, that's not great. So, I can't give a good grade to the front 7 or the defensive line there, because, playing against a banged up offensive line without Anthony Davis or, playing against, I know Blaine Gabbert, he didn't get sacked against the Rams in week 1. Blaine Gabbert is more elusive than he looks. Just look at the fact that he's still starting in the NFL. He's eluded all the teams that should know that he's not good enough to start in the league. He's been able to fool them, and just like that, he's fooled defensive linemen and been able to escape sacks. So good on Blaine Gabbert, but next week against the New York Jets, let's see some defensive linemen get to Ryan Fitzpatrick, get some sacks, force some interceptions, force some bad decisions, maybe force a fumble. We haven't seen Cliff Averill, do a strip sack yet. So let's maybe see one of those, and that'll be great. The Seahawks have 3 forced fumbles this season, but no fumble recoveries. So let's see if we can figure that out. Let's see if the Seahawks can figure that out. That's something to think about too. Quentin Jefferson out this week. Hopefully he comes back healthy and ready to go because, I think he has a lot of potential, and we'll see if he can play a factor, but overall, just some decent stuff. And, overall on the defense, I think giving up 2 touchdowns, that fourth quarter, everything was looking great, but then that fourth quarter breakdown, I got to say that's not great. Tyler Lockett's punt return, that's great. But, overall, and I think the special teams did a great job, but yeah, overall the defense going to lock it in. You got the Jets next week. Try and get a win on the road so we don't get into this funk as a fan saying, "Oh, great, they're 0-2 on the road. They're never going to win on the road." Blah blah blah. Their next road game after that is at the Arizona Cardinals in week 7, and then at the New Orleans Saints in week 8. It's going to be a tough stretch, and you want to make sure that you're not, putting up a narrative that the Seahawks again are going back to not being able to win on the road, and hopefully that's something that they can get through. There's going to be some tough road games this year, including at the Patriots and at the Packers. So overall, a 37-18 win. It's the 7th year in a row, all 7 years under Pete Carroll, that the Seahawks have posted a score, been in a game and won a game where they posted a final score that had never been done in NFL history. I keep wanting to say 38-17 because that does sound like a score, but 37-18 never happened before. So good for them, I guess. And that's it for this episode of the Instant Reaction Seasides podcast with Kenneth Arthur. And that's me, Kenneth Arthur. Go to fieldgulls.com, follow on Twitter at Field Gulls, like on Facebook. I want to get those likes up on Facebook. So go to facebook.com/fieldgulls and just throw us a like and hack your family members' Facebooks, then make them like the page, share the stuff that's being shared on Field Gulls through Facebook, and good things will happen for Field Gulls. And you like that, right? That's it for this week's Seaside Chats with Kenneth Arthur, the Instant Reaction Show. Tune in for the next time for another Seaside Chat.